mentioned, my name is Chris Connor. I'm the Director of Institutional Relations for Canada. I handle all of our partnerships with the school boards, districts, colleges, and universities throughout all of the provinces of Canada. SJ, you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Hello. My name obviously is Sarah Jane, or I get SJ most of the time. And in Labster, I'm our global curriculum lead, which means I do a lot of research and work with our project managers and our content development team to commission new content and make new simulations. I'm an educational researcher with an interest in kind of the democratic use of digital spaces for education. So if you ever want to reach out and talk about that, always feel free. I am coming to you from England. Northeast England, Newcastle to be precise, and it is currently 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for staying up with us, SJ. I'm actually in Boston, Massachusetts. It's about 9:02 p.m. And we're thankful for everybody that has joined us here today. So appreciate your time and your interest in jumping in here. So a little bit of background about Labster. I'm not sure if anybody has heard anything or heard about Labster or how we've kind of come about, but Labster, we have virtual science labs that cover a wide variety of disciplines. We started out as a very small outreach project at the University of Copenhagen to kind of help solve some challenges that the co-founder at that time was seeing while he was teaching science courses. And I think that what he noticed at that time was something that most teachers or all teachers around the world tend to notice in their classrooms to some degree. Lack of student engagement is something that teachers we talk to a lot tend to talk about. I'm sure that you guys experience that as well. Motivation. How well are the students actually retaining knowledge that you guys are teaching to them? But in the lab, he felt that some of the lab teaching methods were a little ineffective, inexpensive. And I think that we all can agree that in many ways, labs are limited by time and resources. So this sort of led to the development of Labster as a way to, give students access, to give students the ability to, go through the things that they normally wouldn't be able to spend more time in the lab, to the repeatability. But to engage them in the theory and techniques that you guys are working so hard to teach them. But also give the instructors and the teachers another way to kind of quantify how the students are actually mastering the material. And so since, as we've continued to grow, and I think we can all understand and grasp right away that one of the big benefits with simulations is that we can simulate any real world scenario. So when it comes to lab safety, I mean, that's an obvious, real good shoe-in right there. And we can see how beneficial it is to practice lab safety in a simulated environment rather than trying to, actually set the lab on fire and get out in time before it blows up. Although, it is quite fun to blow up a lab in a virtual environment, and I encourage you to go to our website and check it out. You can actually do that, and the students have fun doing it as well. But it's a very serious thing, giving them the repeatability to, master those, get the mental reps of what's going to happen in a lab accident. When we're talking about education, higher education, secondary education, getting the students the ability to master the techniques, the repeatability, to the ability to be in a lab longer, to spend more time there, but also to give them the ability of a different perspective, to be able to see what's actually happening on a molecular level when they're mixing reagents or they're conducting that experiments. But the ability to retry over and over and over again and experiment in a safe, cost-effective environment on their own terms. And by simulating these scenarios, we're able to solve some of the biggest challenges facing science education today. Many times, prior to COVID, 95% of our usage were in physical courses. And many of those teachers were approaching us and saying, look, really two of the biggest challenges that they wanted to kind of overcome were, the first one was, we're trying to reach the student that's at risk, the student that is having a problem with keeping up. They didn't have a lot of exposure to the concepts of science early. They came in, they're, falling behind, they're at risk of repeating, closing that knowledge gap. The other one that they were really wanting to, conquer were the conceptual understanding. Just in general, we're trying to reach students in a different way. We're trying to just make sure that they're improve their general understanding of the concepts that we're trying to teach them. Increased learning loss due to the pandemic, poor student preparedness, disengaged students that, again, we're just trying to find another tool to help students engage, not only online because of COVID, but just in general. Students that they come to lab and they're already lost and they don't see a benefit in making more of an effort. How can we help those students become more engaged in lab activities, or just in lecture? How can we help them kind of follow along? And so these are some of the things that, again, I think that every teacher sort of deals with, or issues that manifest in every classroom around the world in one way or another. So if you guys feel like there's anything else that you may want to add to this list, please feel free to jump in the chat, let us know, and participate. I'm going to go ahead and swap it over to SJ and explain to us how simulations are made, and walk us through the building our spectrophotometer.
Thanks, Chris. That was such a great introduction. Thanks so much. Yeah, so that is my fresh 21-year-old face there on the left of the screen. Just about to split some cells that I have been culturing for about 2 weeks in order to make a very strange experiment about tanning. But that's what I used to do. The reason I kind of wanted to highlight this is because all of the simulations that we build at Labster use our in-house scientific expertise. There's always a scientist involved in the creation of the simulation. So we hope that we know what we're talking about, or we certainly can understand the concepts and the theories behind it. And it's such a rich experience. So I joined Labster as what was called a simulation director, which is a bit like a script writer, but for science, for making simulations. And it was the first time I really got to work with an art team and a content development coding team and a platform team to really bring everything together that when I used to be an educator, I would have loved to have had. Spectrophotometry is one of those techniques. I don't know if you yourselves use it. Get in the chat. Is this a topic that you actually do teach? Yes. Work with science content, yes. When I used to teach spectrophotometry, the vast majority of the 400 strong cohort that I would have in first year just didn't really see past the black box element of the technique. So they didn't really understand what the light source was or how we actually got data from the instrument. And having a simulated experience that could really help them overcome some of those primary wonderings and really help them engage with the thing that they were doing in the lab would have been so useful. So I was very grateful to have the opportunity to be involved in the building of this simulation and create something that I would have loved from my old students to have actually had. So let me know what you think, and I hope you see the value in it for sure. Yes, can we go to the next slide? Awesome. So I would never ask for your feedback on something that you'd never experienced, because that's just not fair. So if you'd like to, please feel free to switch on your microphones. It is a workshop after all. I would love your comments and love your chat as we go through. I would love now to give you the opportunity to play along the simulation with me. I'm going to introduce you to it in a little while, but I'm also going to just pop a link in the chat so you can have it loading in the background. You can have this link on one condition, that when it loads, you do not press start straight away. Because what will happen is as soon as you press start, you're going to hear music, you're going to hear a voiceover, and surely you want to hear my beautiful English dulcet tones for the duration of this workshop. So I'll put the link into the chat now. Feel free to, oh, Chris has done it. Thank you so much, Chris. Feel free to load this sim up in a separate tab or a separate browser, ideally separate browser window, and just pop it into the background to load while we're going through a few slides. If you can put two screens, split your screen, that'll help it load a bit better. But if you can get that loaded up now, it just takes a little bit of time. So hopefully by the time we get to actually play along together, we'll all be dialed in well. If you've got, as I know I am terrible for. If you've got loads of browser windows open with lots of tabs, you might want to close some of those windows just to ensure that the simulation isn't too jerky for you and you give as much of your RAM as you can to both the call and the simulation. Love for you to have a really great experience with this. So yes, Chris, next slide. Cool. So this is the simulation we're going to play. It is a virtual spectrophotometry sim. It is based around what goes on inside the instrument and what are the fundamental principles of spectrophotometry, of photometry in general, that are exploited by this technique in order to create an analytical tool. So our learning objectives are just there. What we want to do is help the student understand, oh no, let me check the link for you. 1 second. That's very strange. Is that the same link? You better try. Very strange. It should work just fine. We checked this just the other day and it was working just fine. Give it another try and I'll talk you through what the learning objectives just there. So yes, figuring out how a spectrophotometer is used to measure absorbance data and try and get the students to understand it's not just the fact that you put a cuvette in a machine and start measuring. There are components within that machine, that instrument, that are doing work in order to generate data. And there's a detection element, there's a light element, there's a wavelength separating element. And that all works together to get you your absorbance data that you so much want for your analytical process. Finally, we cap off learning around the components and around what absorbance data is, with a task to try and choose an optimal wavelength for measuring a substance of interest. So they have to interpret a little bit of data on a graph in order to determine which wavelength is the best one for measuring the product of interest in the simulation. So have you, let me know in the chat, have you managed to click through and get that link? Have you been able to play? If not, we shall play the simulation by, oh no, sad times, friends. We shall play by committee. You can tell me what to do in the lab. Chris, I don't know if that link is the one that we used just the other day when we play tested this. So
I think it was. If the link had expired because they had put a time limit on they had thought that we would probably be over with the workshop by this time. that could be sense. Yeah.
Okay, no worries. In which case, friends, take off your microphones and help me get through this simulation because I'm going to need all the help I can get. I hope this is still fun for you. If not, we can still have a beautiful discussion around the pedagogy, the educational concepts, and the setup of the simulation. So I'd love to kind of like get your views for this to be a little bit of a discussion. Yes, next slide, please.
You can also possibly send out the link to everybody here as well afterwards and make sure that it works.
No problem. Cool. Okay, so Chris, I'm going to take over sharing my screen so I can play the simulation with the people. Yes, and it is the screen. Hopefully the chat was not in the way for you there. Right, okay, so spectrophotometers, here we go. I am excited. So whenever you start a Labster simulation, this is Dr. One, and she's going to be your guide through most of the simulation. You can turn her voiceover off, as I have, just to kind of, you know, not blow your minds with my voice and Dr. One's voice. Just in the top right hand corner here, we've got some beautiful lab music. Unfortunately, I don't think you're going to get to enjoy this today, but you can do when Chris sends you out the link in the future. The sound effects are just like the different activities that we do in the lab, and then the voice is Dr. One's voice. This is the lab pad. It's the main thing that information's put on, and you can raise it and lower it as you like. So if this was the first time you were playing a simulation, we just click continue to click through. Right, home tab, we can click on the theory. and we can click on media and then click on mission. So it's trying to give us a little bit more information. Right now we're going through a tutorial that you don't have to do every time. Dr. One does not have a cool English accent. I'm really sorry about that. But we are exploring different platforms, and one thing we noticed with our audiences in India is that they responded really positively to English spoken with an Indian English accent. So there does exist a version of Dr. One that has an Indian English accent, and I absolutely love it. But Chris, totally put that on the ideas board, English Dr. One, 100%. So right now I'm just working through a tutorial that's completely optional. You can skip it if you want once you've played a couple of Labster simulations, but it's totally good just to give it a go the first time you use a sim. So right now I'm just using the scroll wheel on my mouse. Most students I know access through laptops like Chromebooks. They can just use the 2-finger gesture on their touchpad to scroll down in the same way. And then camera. Yeah, this is a good one to play with. Sometimes you want to look around the lab room to like find things or to move to a different place. So all I'm doing now is clicking and dragging to move the camera around and look around the lab room. Dr. One moves with me. It's quite strange. So I've tried that out. And then finally, this is a quiz question. And we use quiz questions throughout the simulations to reinforce knowledge and also as a tool for recall. So the way that they work is you just click on the answer. It's really straightforward. But if you're unsure on a particular answer, it's telling you here, you can just click on the theory tab and it gives you a little bit more information in order to work through the practical and work through the quiz question, sorry. So right now, we know it's Dr. One's name. Just click on Dr. One. It's like, yes, got it right. Get some points. Right now, it's just talking through some of the features of the lab pad. So the media tab, which is where we store images. Different labs have different images that can support learning or can reinforce learning in different places. So in this one, for example, it's about spectrophotometry, and we've just got a little bit more of a stylized diagram representation of what what the components would be in a layout. And safety is important. This is what our hazard symbols are, just as examples. Cool. So we've looked at our images. We've learned about our mission tab. What's nice is as the user works through the simulation, they go through a series of missions. And if the user or if the student wants to stop and come back to the sim, they can always jump back to a previous point. So if I got to here and then I had to stop, or I wanted to go back and replay, I could just click and restart that mission and go through it again just to try and understand a bit better. So we get these save points going through so students don't have to, do all of the simulation in one go. Some of them are very short. They last only 10 minutes or so if it's just a single concept, but some can take up to 45 minutes if it's a more capstone experience for the education. Okay, so home, continue. There we go. So Dr. One's now recognizing that we've got some knowledge about how things work, and I definitely want to get started. So let's go. Yay. That's my favorite Dr. One gesture. It's really sweet. So we're getting a little bit of information about the storyline right now. It's Dusty. Thank you for bringing these boxes with you. We are on Mars, and we've brought a spectrophotometer with us, and we have to build it before we can actually use it in the lab. So that's our mission for today. We're going to build a spectrophotometer. Have you used it before? This is one of those tasks that we include to try and help students that have different levels of knowledge that they're bringing to the simulation feel a bit more comfortable. So this is we call it a conversation with options, but it's just an opportunity to be like, of course, I know what I'm talking about. I'm good. Spectrophotometer. I love a pun. You might love. I love a pun, and I got to wrote this, so I included a pun. But students have different levels of entry knowledge, so they can just click on it. They have a conversation. It's just to center the student in the experience a little bit more. Now then, you might have noticed that my hand does not match my hand. When you play the simulation, or when you get to play it yourself, you might notice that the hand is a different color. And this is a recent feature that we've implemented. It used to be that the hand in our first version of our simulations was just a Caucasian skin tone. And what we wanted to do was create a little bit more clear representation in the lab room of different skin tones, so that students can have a little bit more ownership and feel like they're represented in the resources that they're using. So there are 5 different skin tones, ranging from like a very, very, very pale Caucasian skin tone to a very, very dark kind of African skin tone. And they are randomly generated, so you might be a different person next time you play the lab. It's lucky dip. So it's just one of those things we're trying to do to promote inclusivity and diversity within the cultural context of science education. So our first task, safety first. We get our lab coat, we put it on, we get our safety specs, we put them on, and we are ready to go. We're going to click on our box to get started, and we're going to teleport to the spectrophotometer staging area. I'm so excited. This teleport screen that you just saw is a loading screen. So when you have to switch between different scenes, so say for example, going from the lab room to the staging area, we have to load up a different scene so that the student can play through the experience. And that teleport screen is just kind of a holder while it loads up. And we're not actually teleporting, just in case you thought we might be. Yes, so a little bit of introduction. Dr. One from this point forward calls the spectrophotometer a spec because it gets very repetitive to hear, but also because it's a stumble word. Students polled and said that they, liked the recognition that sometimes the vocabulary can be tricky. So Dr. One recognizes that and accepts it. Hopefully makes them feel a bit better about themselves. So we're going to learn about our different components. You can see just on the lab pad in the left of the screen, it's given me an instruction. So hover over the box and the components to learn their functions. And what we've got here is a tooltip. So cuvette is on my tooltip with a little bit of further information about what actually goes on or what that component's for. So tooltips are really important in the simulation, just to recognize different things. In all of our simulations, tooltips are important. I can also click on the lab pad to get a little bit more information about what I want to do. So tell me about spec. First challenge, see if you can build this simplified spec by positioning the available components to shine a light path from the source through the sample cuvette so it lands on the detector. So it's given me a little bit more information about what I need to do. Okay, so I've got to build the spec. I'm going to do it wrong, just to demonstrate a thing. So I'm just clicking on a component and I pick it up and then I put it. Can you see this kind of hologram, this blue thing that shows up? That means there's a place to put it down. It seems intuitive. You'd be surprised how many people don't get it. So that's what the blue thing is. It's a space to put things down. So I've got all my stuff in place. Now I've got to hit the power up button. You don't hear that sound effect. Oh, it's beautiful. It's a really good one. Oh, negative feedback here. The whole idea of this kind of mini game is that the student can fail. They can try again and they can recognize where maybe they went wrong. So if I press this and it powers up, you can see the light is bouncing off a mirror and hitting the cuvette, but it's not doing what it was intended. So let's try and get this right. Oh, I've got to put it down. Can't pick up 2 things. Click, click, click. Cuvette, cuvette, cuvette. So hopefully light will go this way now. Success. Yes, awesome, you built it. Dr. One's so encouraging. She gives you such positive feedback. I love it. So the idea here is that we've got a little bit of real-time feedback so the student can see what's actually going on. The light source is shining light through a cuvette and landing on a detector. Obviously, this isn't a full schematic of a spec, but it's illustrating the idea of photometry, that we use light to measure a sample. What we're going to do now, after we've completed this first component, is that we're going to work through a series of 4 levels. So there's a big overlap in Labster between what we learned from game design in terms of complexity curves and level-based interaction design, and inquiry-based design and constructivist pedagogies. We kind of blend the 2 together in order to create learning experiences that can encapsulate a degree of constructive failure for the students, an opportunity for them to play with parameters, put things in different places and learn from the mistakes in a safe way. So that's what we're trying to do with the paradigm in this. So I've moved up to the next level, level 2. I like to think about Sonic the Hedgehog when I was a kid. I'm like, yes, level 2. Light source, cuvette, detector, excellent. Little bit of extra tooltip here. Now we've got to fit our new components in it. So it gives me a little bit more information. We're starting to introduce the more complex vocabulary associated with spectrophotometry. Not too much, so it's not overwhelming for the student, but introducing vocabulary that they will encounter later in the simulation, so we can build upon it. Again, trying to exploit those constructivist theories of learning. So we've got molar extinction coefficient, substance absorbs, Beer-Lambert law. Okay, I'm going to come back to that. We're going to learn about our new components. So here we can see a collimator, a little bit of information, prism, and a slit card. So at this point, I don't really know what these are, but I've got a little bit of information for me to get going with. Again, introducing concepts a little bit more slowly. We've got a little description. And again, we're using those conversations with options here so that the student can have a conversation with Dr. One and be like, yes, I want to know more about this thing. So if I didn't know what a prism is, I can click on it. It makes rainbows. Yes, it does. And it just gives a little bit more description about the different components. The nice thing here is it goes through a cycle of those conversations. So the student can either be like, no, I know what I'm doing. Let me get on with my experience, or they can go through all of the other options to learn more about the different things. And again, they can always click on the theory to get to know the concept a little bit more deeply if they want to. So I'm going to go ahead and click continue. Dr. One's like, yay, pumping you up to keep going. And this is my challenge. Place new components in the box. 1, 2, or 3, guys. Where should I put it? In the chat. 1, 2, or 3. 1. Okay, let's go 1. Prism. Where are we going? 1, 2, or 3? Oh, 2 anyway. 2 or 3. 1, 2. Okay, I'm going with 2. That means the collimator has to go here. Let's see if it works. Nice typing, people. Nice typing. Oh, it's not worked. Oh, but what we can see is that the light is going through the slit, and then it's hitting the prism, but all of the light is going in different directions, so it isn't in a nice parallel beam. And if we wanted to go through the theory, we could learn a bit more about why that mightn't be right and what needs to happen. We've also got a helpful diagram there to give us some clues about how it needs to be set up. So we're kind of letting the student explore the instrument, explore the theory, and try and figure this out for themselves. They can also just chuck things in different places and see what works and look at the differences. Depends on how that student likes to learn. So I'm just going to go ahead and put these in the right places just to show you what happens. Power up. Oh man, I love the sound effect on that button. I can't wait for you to play this in your own time. Hooray. Click back on home. Amazing work. So here again, we're using real-time feedback just to help the students see what's right and what's wrong. This will match up to what's in theory. So if we scroll up, we can see that it matches the image, that we've got our collimator, our prism, and our slit. And we're seeing light going from divergent to nice parallel beam. We're getting diffraction, so we're seeing the wavelengths split out. And then we're using the slit card to shield all of the different wavelengths, so only one gets let through, and that single wavelength hits the cuvette and then goes through the detector, and anything that's in that sample is going to get absorbed, and we measure the transmittance. Job's a good one. Brilliant. So Dr. One's super happy for me for getting that right. And we move on to the final level. Now this one's a little bit more complex. And what we're trying to help the student learn when we read is that the last spec we looked at is in a long linear configuration, and the instruments that we see in the lab are small boxes. So how do we take all of those components and fit them into something that's usable in the lab? So the instrument's going to take up less space. We learn here in the instructions that the collimator is a mirror rather than a lens. So we have to be thinking. It's not just a simple case of doing what we did in the past. We need to think this is going to reflect rather than transmit light. So let's think about it. So we've got a light source we can see. We've got a cuvette, we've got a detector and our power up button, and we can see our mirrors. We recognize these patterns, the 3 triangles from the previous versions. So slit, collimator, prism. Is it going to work, people? Yes, no, hopefully. Hopefully it works. Oh, will it work? Let's see. Oh no! So what we can see is that the light is going straight through the detector. It's not going where we want it to. So we're getting a clue about what might be wrong, because we know the collimator is a mirror now, not a lens. So all of these little visual cues are helping the student understand where they might have gotten wrong and what they can do to remedy the problem. I should also say that we have an this simulation is being made accessible at the minute. It's not fully accessible yet, but for visually impaired students, there's a description, so an audio description of what's happening. And that helps the student determine whether or not what they're doing is right or wrong. And that's a feature that we've been rolling out. Quite a large, about 30% of our catalogue is accessible for visually impaired to AA standard. I believe, I'd have to double check that, but I'm pretty certain I'm right. But we have these experiences now, a whole different platform that helps visually impacted students access the labs and get a commensurate learning experience, as they should do, of their peers. So I've got my components in the right place. Have I? Let's check. We've got bouncing off the collimator. We see our diffraction, beautiful, go away lab pad. Hitting a mirror, slit, single wavelength, bounces through, yes, success, I love it. This is one of the prettiest simulations. Chris, back me up, this is pretty. It is pretty.
This is actually one of the most beautifully aesthetic ones that I've seen, yeah.
This whole setup was actually designed by one of our artists in Bali, Yanuar. He came up with a really elegant way to try and put this visual feedback in such a way that it helped the student learn and wasn't just an animation that was, it worked one way or another. This actually changes, the conditions change depend on where the elements are or the different assets, so like the collimator or the prism. So Yanuar deserves lots of props for his excellent work.
Well, that explains it. He was in Bali, had plenty of time to sit on the beach to determine exactly how he was going to design this. Right, exactly. I'm very jealous of the people in Bali.
How can we not be jealous of the people in Bali? They lived a good life. Okay, so we're at our final level now. This is level 4. And we're really introducing some of the higher level concepts that exist within spectrophotometry. So we're thinking about incident intensity and transmitted light intensity. And this is where we start digging deep into Beer-Lambert law, absorbance wavelengths, and really starting to think about, we've built this thing, we understand how light moves and how we use light to measure a substance. But now how do I measure a sample? How can I make choices to develop a sample, or sorry, to measure a sample? So we learn a little bit, we can check the theory, learn a little bit more about the principles, analysis, or just the machine, sorry, the instrument in general. Or we can check media just to like get a little bit more information about the schematic if we want to remind ourselves or have a different way to view that information. Okay, let's go back to it. So when we choose what wavelength we want to use, we want to know where does the substance absorb light best. So what we're saying right now is that the thing we're measuring on Mars is a catalyst, and it converts a common compound to a very hard to make product with efficiency. So we want to measure the product. Excellent. We've got a graph. The reactant curve is in red, the product is in green. So we can see these two curves here. Reactant, product. And we know we want to measure the product. Get a little bit more information here. So we want to know, where does it absorb best? We've got absorbance up the side, gets higher as it goes up. Product absorbs good here. Sorry, reactant absorbs well here. Product absorbs well here. So this is the wavelength that I want. What I really like about this, and it's a little sideways thing, but it's something elegant that I quite like. When I used to teach spec, students didn't seem to make the connection between wavelength and light and color. And the idea that 595 was yellow was like a light bulb moment for a lot of students. And this simulation tries to capture that light bulb moment, and that, oh, wavelength actually denotes color. I know that's a really silly thing to say, and it sounds silly coming out of my mouth, but that connection was so difficult to make in students, to stop seeing wavelength as a number and just a value and start recognizing it as it can be a perceived color. So we can go over here, we can start hovering, checking which wavelength is the one that we want. 595, click it, we see this change to the color that we want because the slit has moved in order to let the right light through. And we are now yellow, and we are where we want to be. Excellent, you're an analytical genius. You are too. The product absorbs at 595, and we are good. So we're going to go back to the lab now and put this all in action. So while we're teleporting back to the lab room, we need to do some consolidation activities. So I'm going to need your help on this, team. I need some A, B, C, Ds in just a second. The reason we use quiz questions, or one of the main reasons we use quiz questions in Labster, is to consolidate knowledge in previous activity. We subscribe quite strongly to Kolb's learning cycle, and we try to set up lots of mini learning cycles within the simulation where we introduce something new, give a chance to play with something, have some experiential learning, and then review and consolidate that learning. And we do that multiple times within the sim, and hopefully over the whole sim, there's another cycle that's all wrapped up in our storyline and our guided learning. So these quiz questions are just consolidating the knowledge and checking for knowledge transfer. You'll see our score hopefully increase as we go through. So team, what is the function of a spectrophotometer? What does it do? A, B, C, or D? Help me out. Does it measure weight? Does it measure light? What does it do? Chris, can you remember?
No, I can't, but I'm gonna go with B.
B. Tracy's also got a B. Yeah, okay, we're good.
Okay.
B. Great job. We got it. 10 points. 10 points. Okay, next question. What is the function of the diffraction grating? This one's a tricky one because a diffraction grating is mentioned in the simulation, but we work with prisms.
I'm gonna go with the typical choice that students make when faced with a multiple choice question that they don't know the answer to. It's always C.
It's C. Well, Tracy's got a really good answer there, and so
okay.
So they're also saying C. So let's go with C. Excellent. Another 10.
I would have been correct. I would have been correct in this case.
Excellent. Well done. C.
Thank you, guys.
So we get a little bit of a response afterwards as well, just to kind of go through and say, yeah, you got that right. And here's a little statement to kind of tie that all together and really hammer it home. Okay, had we got it wrong, we would have lost 2 points. So we would have only got it 8 points on our second chance and then 6 points on our third chance. So if you use this with your students and you want to see how many times it took them to get that answer, or if you want to gauge how well they did, you can look at that score and see that it gets reduced if it takes longer for the student to get the answer. Okay, last question, gang, last question. What parameter does the detector measure directly? Is it transmitted? Is it incident? Is it the wavelength, or is it the absorbance? Who knows? Who knows? If anyone knows.
Can I choose C again?
A, total incident lights.
A, Mark has A.
Oh. No.
Taylor's going to go with D, and Wendy. We have a consensus here. We have Taylor, Tracy, and Wendy saying D. So let's go with D.
Did you notice how the answers have shuffled around to stop students from just clicking through? It's a cheeky little thing that we do, but it stops kind of like, well, I've tried D. They have to think about the answer each time and make sure that they are making a good choice. Tracy and Taylor are both going for A.
We do have another consensus now. Ooh,
no.
Very tricky.
It measures transmittance. So the substance in the cuvette absorbs light, and whatever is transmitted through, because it doesn't get absorbed, is the stuff that we measure. So transmittance is what we measure, but the data is absorbance because there's some maths going on. More about that another time. It's all in the theory though, if you did want to learn a little bit more about it. So Dr. One's like, great, you did great work. You were natural, pumping you up a little bit more just towards the end. The final thing we do is just a short survey to see whether or not you feel like you've learned something. Hopefully you do. I'm going to be cheeky and go for an A. I'm really sorry. A little bit of a thank you, and then the student gets a little celebration with a medal. They've 100% complete. Their score is just in the top left. That gets saved to our teacher dashboard so that the teacher can access that score. And we are now done. All done. That is the end of the simulation. So I will stop sharing my screen. I hope you enjoyed playing along with me. I wish you could have played it for yourselves, but that's kind of a little quick intro as to what it's like to play a simulation and the types of experiences that you can expect from a Labster simulation. Hey, Tracy, I can see you now.
Hello, Tracy.
Hello. I know how hard it is to present to blank screens and stuff like that. And I must say that you guys did a brilliant job. Very well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Is
How
that
did you
Mark?
like? Is that? Oh, there is a
Okay,
Mark
guys.
too.
Yes,
How's it going?
Mark. Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm good, sir. I'm good.
And
Good
Taylor
to see
too.
you.
Oh, I love it
Hello,
when people
Taylor.
have plants in the background. Excellent, Taylor. I love it. I just have like boring textbooks and beanie babies from students. No, yeah. Is there anything about the simulation experience or the design or how it works that you'd like to know about? Or do you have any specific questions about the sim? Like, we are here to answer whatever you're looking for, or if you've got something you'd like to know more about.
I can say, Chris, on behalf of Prairie Valley, that our teachers have certainly, especially with COVID, and having to do things remotely, this has been for most of our science people really a lifesaver as far as being able to do science without being able to get into a school laboratory. It's been really well used. I think our teachers have certainly appreciated it.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm really happy to hear that, and that's yes, that's awesome. I mean, I think I told you this story when we were first talked, that I was a returning student, about 10 years ago, and it had been about 15 years since I'd been in a high school lab, and so when I went back and was going through chemistry and organic chemistry, it was, I mean, I don't know if we have any chemies here, but no disrespect, it was just absolutely horrible for me because I just had such a hard time, and I always wish that there was something else that I could have done other than staying up till 2 or 3 in the morning to help really kind of grasp the concepts and the techniques that they were trying to teach me. So as it was, I did get a B, but I could have gotten an A had I had laughter. That's what I always say.
It's the same from the educator side too, though. Like, yeah. I remember teaching chemistry, and there were just some times where I felt like I wanted to give my students more, and it's just like, I want you to really like get the mechanics of this thing, and I didn't have a way to really give a high interference learning experience. Like, the thing that dialed spectrophotometry in for me was actually as a PhD student, where I actually dropped a spectrophotometer and had to fix it. And it was that kind of like, it's like, I don't know about other people, but fixing your own car for the first time or fixing something that has broken really gives you an intimate knowledge of how it works, and it can really transcend any other experience on a topic. So the goal in this simulation was to try and emulate that high interference experience that we couldn't give in the lab experience. Certainly we're not with 400 students like I was teaching. We'd have like 3-hour labs repeated 4 times in a week, and it was hellish. It really was. And the time that we had together with the students could have been so much better spent if we could reduce the cognitive load and just let them be in the lab, because they already knew the machine, they already knew the mechanics behind it, and all they had to focus on was using it as an instrument to do their investigations. So stuff like that, I feel grateful for the opportunity to try and provide them now within labs. And I just hope that they do help with those very tricky, like, abstract concepts and the stuff that's really difficult to visualize in traditional didactic teaching scenarios. Yeah. Whereabouts, what topics do you teach?
Well, I'm actually a curriculum coordinator, SJ. I look after 39 schools and all the science people in those schools. So yeah, I'm a division office guy. I'm
going to bother you another time about curriculum.
Sure.
I think that Taylor, you had mentioned that you teach an online school. Is that correct?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. This is actually my first year as like a full-time teacher, but yeah, I teach at an online school. It's always been online. And this year they had a huge influx in students. So this is like going to be really awesome, because right now it's just kind of like the lesson notes are laid out for the kids. They read them, they do the assignment, and like they're done. So it's not like, and I mean, kids are at home, so they're very limited with what they can actually do for hands-on lab activities and hands-on science. So I really like this. I'm definitely going to take it to my school and the other science teachers and tell them this is a fantastic idea. And even like in like a physical classroom, I could see using this as like a pre-lab too, right? Like to really hit home what is happening in your lab.
There's been like so many, oh sorry Chris, please.
No, go ahead.
There's been so many different use cases for Labster, and it's interesting that you're in a purely online school, because one of the use cases is kind of at higher ed level, where people want to learn chemistry and biology but are never going to require the manual dexterity of the lab skills, but they have to understand the concepts behind it in order to get to where the data comes from. The example that was always given was a bioscience student who wants to be a patent attorney, or who wants to be a solicitor or an accountant and wants to specialize within the sciences. So they don't necessarily need the research skills, but they have to understand what it means to employ technology within a lab environment. So I guess for those online schools as well, if there isn't already a requirement for the manual dexterity, or that isn't a learning outcome of the student, is to develop those manual skills, then yeah, it's a really great solution. But the pre-lab is definitely one of those things where if we can help the student feel less anxious about going into the wet lab environment, because they already know what to expect in terms of like the glassware or the instruments or how that stuff works, or even just they have an overview of the procedure that isn't just read from a protocol. We've got some beautiful publications on how well it actually performs in that space. But yeah, the cognitive load's reduced. They can focus on the task at hand rather than worrying about, those basic aspects of what's this flask called? Yeah, 100%. Pre-labs are a great strategy for it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you before.
No, not at all. Tracy, where are you coming from? Are you in? I assume obviously Saskatchewan. I assume. I hope you can see us. I know you got the sun, and I'm jealous that you guys still have sun over there. Right?
Sun is long gone.
Yeah.
It was 28 here in Regina today, so it was an absolutely beautiful day.
Yeah, we didn't get quite that warm. I'm in Saskatoon, so that's about 2 hours north. But I did take the opportunity. I took my notebook and I shut my laptop off. I'm working at home, so I went and sat on the deck with the birds and took some notes. But I actually work, I'm not in the classroom. I run education programs at Canada's synchrotron, so our version of your diamond. And so what I've done that is similar to this, which is kind of interesting, is when we have when we used to have classrooms come in and go on a tour, I have a little activity that I call build a beamline. But it's very similar in that I give them a flashlight and some prisms and a slit, and I say, pick the color however I felt that day. And they had to figure out, using those pieces, how to select out just that wavelength, those wavelengths of light, and shine it on the end. I told them they were building a beamline.
I love it. It's like the fundamentals of photometry. I absolutely love that. That's cool that you could do it in the physical environment. That's such a smart idea. I love this. I'm gonna build a sim on.
Yeah. Well, the first one I built, my slit was a margarine tub lid that I took an X-Acto knife to and cut a slit in it to see if I could make it work.
That's great. Yeah.
And we went by pretty quickly, but if you haven't yet been to our booth, you can enter your name for a class set of diffraction glasses. So you look through the glasses and then everything divides up, so all you see are rainbows. It's really psychedelic.
I love this. I remember having one of those ones that was almost like a little triangle cone shape with like a honeycomb on the end. It was such I still love those. So it's really exciting. How about you, Wendy? What are you teaching or?
I'm actually an online teacher as well at in Saskatchewan, and teaching physical science 20 and science 10, and also some chemistry. So this is great. I love the idea of having these labs and having this option for students to do at home, because we're always looking for something that's, you know, hands-on, or something for them to recognize lab stuff at home, right? So it's great. Is it a licensing thing? Like I must have missed that in the beginning when I was running late. Like, is it like, do you sign up for a license to use these labs, or is it a free global thing?
Well, I'd love to be as altruistic and say it is absolutely free, and we'd love to give it to you. There is a licensing component to this, and you know, you and I we can talk about it. It comes down to, you know, how many students, you know, what sort of usage are we looking at, and it's certainly something that I'd love to talk with you a little bit more about. We try to be as malleable as possible when it comes to, you know, the high schools in particular, to be able to provide this access. And one of the things that we do with the high schools that's a lot different than the universities or the colleges is that with the high schools, the license that we've built out is that you guys have access to the entire, you know, catalog of simulations. So you know, usually there's like, you know, universities we're not as kind to. So I like to say you either got to choose 8 or you have to choose all of them, you know, and there's other packages. With the high schools, we think it's important that, you know, the students could be able to not only get the ones that are at their level, but the ones that are also above their level. A lot of times you see, you know, 11 and 12. I think Prairie Valley, you guys are using this quite a bit for post-secondary prep. Students in 11 and 12 that are using the intra-level university and college simulations kind of challenge themselves to, you know, prepare for what they're going to be doing, what they're going to be seeing at the next level. So, but yeah, you can, you know, to provide your email, I'm more than happy to reach out to you and we can talk a little bit more specifically about it. And we can come up with something to help put the resources in your hands. And what I was going to say is essay's probably gonna kill me, but I'm excited about this, and I keep talking about it, and I'm going to continue talking about it. Is that at some point in the future, we're going to be letting you guys build your own simulations, and I think that is the. Okay, you're going to kill me?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay, cool.
Exciting.
Yes, this is exciting. I think it's important to let you guys, you know, I think this is the real potential of the simulations, right? Is being able to kind of customize your experience for the student to the techniques, the equipment, and things like that. You know, which variables are going to be, you know, which data variables are you know, you want to be switched around and things like that. So we're hoping that is something that we can provide you guys sooner rather than later. And no, Mark, I know I told you about this before, and then, you know, we've been screaming about it. So it's coming though. I believe it's coming very soon. We're right there, right, SJ? Put you on the spot.
Our biggest challenge is just making the interface for building a simulation as user-friendly as possible, and ensuring that we have a repertoire of assets that serves everybody's needs. So say, for example, in the spectrophotometry simulation that I just showed you, I mentioned how creative Yanuar was in designing that kind of interaction and the animations and the physics that went with choosing the different wavelengths. You know, that was something that we had to design and build in order to make that simulation. It's not just something off the shelf that we can pull out and pop in a sim. So if we want educators to build their own simulations, we need to have a good enough lab cupboard of equipment so that it can be deployed within the simulation. So that's a big challenge. Yeah, and just making it as friendly as possible.
I've actually told Chris this, but the reason we actually ended up going with Labster actually was our facilities guys. We have a facility guy who came across Labster, I think, when it first kind of came out, when it was being developed in, was it Denmark? I'm not sure.
Yes.
But he looked at it from basically a facilities view, right? Instead of putting, you know, $350,000 into one lab, by utilizing Labster, you could actually basically cut your costs down by.
There's a resourcing issue too around those. I mentioned before about doing one lab 4 times in a week, and the cost of actually running that lab for 3 hours even later on, I used to teach stage 3 pharmacology at Newcastle University here in the UK. And one of the labs that we did there was a 6-hour PCR technique, 6-hour PCR lab, where we would look at different enzymes in the liver and whether or not the genotype, what genotype different samples were. Like, apart from being 6 hours long, it costs a lot to run a lab for that long, and then have the demonstrators, the student teachers, everybody involved in doing that. And the reagents are absolute bomb as well. So anything we can do to kind of reduce the amount of reagent that we're using, reduce the lab time so that it's efficient. Not that we're trying to squeeze students out of the lab, but that we're trying to make efficient use of the resources we've got as universities continue to expand. But also, I hated the mountain of plastic that I was putting in the bin because students, you know, needed a few goes to get it right, just because they didn't understand what the reagents or what the equipment was. So in fact, I can see solutions like Labster actually having a real good environmental benefit in terms of the amount of plastic that we're turning over, to ensure that, you know, we're working as sustainably as possible to creating the next generation of scientists. We need to do that, and solutions like this, I hope, are part of it. But yeah, lots of ways to kind of make those experiences effective as a learning experience, but also efficient in terms of economic and environmental benefit and learning.
Allows for a trial and error.
Yeah.
Before you go to a CLS or to a real lab, right?
Well, the pharmaceutical companies, you know, are screaming for something like that, where that handoff process costs them a lot of money, you know, and if they get it wrong, they have to start over, and it takes time and money. So allowing them to sort of do it over and over and over again on a simulation is a huge ask from them. But I think we'll get there as well. Yeah, I I love doing this. I love teaching. I love learning as I work. And you know, I'm glad that I was a returning student and I did struggle as much because I fell in love with the sciences. Whereas when I was a student in high school, you know, I wasn't as smart as I am today. So this is sort of like playing in a sandbox every day.
Yeah. It does feel like play a lot of the time. I feel quite, it doesn't help your imposter syndrome when you feel like you're playing every day, but it certainly like makes work and life a lot funner. I just wanted to highlight as well, like I know you're all teaching different topics and stuff. As part of my role as the curriculum lead, they call me a Jin. Sorry, I nearly said Jin. I was like a genie. Anyway, as part of my role, I'm currently actively researching different curricula within STEM spaces. So if you ever want to talk about the types of things that you teach and like, oh, I wish I had a lab that did this, like, please reach out to me and talk to me, because I'd love to kind of hear where those pain points exist and where you feel there's real value for deploying a platform like Labster. Like, it's an opportunity to, you know, maybe influence the way that things are built. So please do feel free to reach out and tell me what's on your wish list. All good.
Perfect.
Oh, we at time. That was really fun. I actually enjoyed the discussion. Yeah, that was lovely.
Yeah, I'm actually glad that there wasn't 100 people in here, and you know, this was a much more comfortable discussion amongst a smaller group. So I really appreciate you guys joining us. I will go ahead and drop my email into the chat, and SJ, if you also want to drop your email in there as well, I encourage you guys, please reach out to us. As SJ mentioned, if you have ideas, if you have thoughts about you know, things that we can develop or just general feedback, if you would like to have access to the faculty resource page, I can provide a link that will allow you to play through any of the 200+ simulations that we provide. You know, completely free, nothing, you know, crazy. Just go ahead and get it worked up and get you guys access to it. We offer a lot of supplementary materials as well, lab report templates, customizable lab manuals, hundreds of 3D animations and science images that you can also use in conjunction with the simulation lab manuals templates, or just as a standalone resource with whatever else you guys are doing. So we look forward to hearing from you.
If you do happen to have an opportunity to look into purchasing this, I can tell you from our perspective, Prairie Valley, it's been incredibly good in terms of support and experience that way as well. You send a question in an email and it's answered usually within an hour. It's pretty good. So
Thank you. We do want to highlight that we do provide really good direct student support. So you guys don't have to take on any troubleshooting problems. Oh, hey, hello.
This has been the best thing about Corona. It's meeting everybody's families and pets.
Wow, that is awesome.
Cool.
Oh, very cool. Very cool,
Oh,
guys.
Groot!
Oh, Groot!
I love it. Who have I got? I've got Galactus. This is knitted Galactus that my friend made me.
Okay, since we're doing this, I'm gonna just swing it over. There's Joey, guys.
hey.
Oh, I love Joey.
Yeah, say hi, Joey.
Such a sweet pup. Cool. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed meeting everybody. This has been so nice, and I'm glad that we had the space for the discussion at the end. Like those surreptitious little sparks of sharing are always like the high point for me. So thanks so much for joining in.
Well, on behalf of the SSTS and Cymatics, I want to thank you guys for doing your presentation. We do appreciate your time, especially on a Friday night, and especially probably at almost 2 o'clock in the morning in the UK.
Yeah, I'm going to bed now.
And Chris, I know it's probably almost midnight where you are from too.
Oh,
so
10 o'clock,
really
I'm fine.
Really do appreciate
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.